Welcome to the 2018 edition of the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, the show all about conspiracy theories and conspiracy theories. This year, in response to quite underwhelming levels of patronage, we're taking on advertising.
Now, due to two things. One, our own extreme laziness, and two, who'd want to sponsor a show about conspiracy. Well, yeah, obviously Alex Jones, yes, but because of these things, our sponsors, like most of you, will be completely fictitious. I should like to point out that this was entirely their idea. I wanted nothing to do with it at all.
So this week we're brought to you by Amalgamated Conspiracy, the conspiracy that already has its hooks in you. Think you aren't being watched? Think your lives aren't under surveillance? Think you don't matter a hill of beans in this topsy-turvy world? Well, you're right.
But it doesn't have to be this way. For mere $1 a week, Amalgamated Conspiracy will put your name out there. Perhaps relatives in Australia will hear your name mentioned in relation to a toxic waste spill. Maybe friends in Kenya will read about your death erroneously in the local papers. If you're lucky, maybe you'll find yourself appearing as a mugshot on the news.
And the best thing about it is that you don't have to do anything. Literally. Amalgamated Conspiracy is already collecting your data. All of it. Financial records, trust account details, even that secret account you use to hide money from your partner or pet. They have it all. And they're already siphoning off your daily payments, adding a few cents to every transaction, inventing a cup of coffee here and there on your transaction reports.
Amalgamated Conspiracy, you're already part of the problem.
Indeed.
Rather thing.
The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy.
Righto, hello and welcome in a brand new year, 2018.
In brand new digs, admittedly only for 1 week.
Temporary digs, yes. Two, the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. I'm Josh Addison, he is M. Dentith. We are still in Auckland, New Zealand, just somewhere different.
And it's very wet and it's very grey.
It is, yeah.
Very wet and very grey. The humidity was 76% today, which actually seems a bit low given how rainy it is. So, frankly, we are living in a monsoon, and you should be praying for us to our non-existent gods.
Summertime in Auckland.
And the feeling is groovy.
So, yes, we're back. We've holidayed and Christmased and New Year's Eve.
We've festivised. So much festivising.
In what seems to be a yearly occurrence these days, I went and had another birthday.
You're always having birthdays.
Well, I don't understand.
At least it's 3 like last year.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, when I met you, admittedly, 4 years ago, you were a mere 28,000 years old. And now what are you? You're millions of years old.
Yes, no, quite bizarre.
I mean, the craggy features on your face, I mean, they predate most of human history.
Yes. I'm sorry, but all of this discussion is rendered moot by the bit in Thor Ragnarok.
Which I still haven't seen, which makes me a bad really New Zealander.
There's just a bit where Jeff Goldblum's character talks about his extreme age and says he should be really old, but instead, and then just grins at the camera for an uncomfortably long period of time.
Jeff Goldblum, folks.
Jeff Goldblum. So, anyway, we're back. It suddenly occurs to me that, first of all, we have a single device to share between us.
The short answer being I'm house sitting and don't have all of my equipment with me.
Which means, of course, that we don't have the normal thingy on a different device that has the timer, so we know.
So today's episode could run long.
This could go for weeks, as far as we know.
Very short.
Yep, we're just gonna wing it. So we do have a regular topic.
If you had an Apple tablet, it would give you the time on the top of it all the time. And you'd be able to kind of...
Well, surely that would eat up screen real estate.
It's only about 4 pixels.
Oh, pish. I'm going to use every single pixel on my screen, frankly, the way Android intends.
The way Alphabet intends.
Yes.
This is to stare uncomfortably into each other's eyes. And then who knows, we might even start making out. Some of you would pay good money for that. And some of you are going to pay good money for that. Amalgamated Conspiracy. That information is going to be on your hard drive within the week.
So anyway, it's back to normal, business as usual. We have a main topic for the episode, but before that we have news. For the episode. So
We've got
probably do that.
weeks to catch up on. So many weeks. So many catch-ups.
Let's
Shall
get
we?
started, yes.
Yeah.
Breaking conspiracy theories in the news.
We begin the year with a traditional warning about Freemasonry.
Yes, please check your mortar because falling bricks are a hazard.
Also, if you're in the UK, please do worry about Freemasons in the police getting in the way of actually doing their job of policing properly.
Yes, outgoing chair of the Police Federation, Steve White, told The Guardian at the end of last year that he was concerned about the continued influence of Freemasons in the British police, who are alleged to be getting in the way of reforms in policing.
White is concerned that Masons in the police force have covered up for fellow Masons and favoured them for promotion over more talented but non-Masonic officers.
No actual evidence of Masonic plotting was offered. It was more of a set of feels than anything else. That suggests that if there isn't an actual Masonic plot in the police force in the UK, then the Masons are convenient scapegoats for a failure by the British police to reform adequately over time.
So conspiracy or conspiracy, you can decide.
Meanwhile, in news which will please friend of the show and noted philosopher of conspiracy theories Lee Basham,
And by please we mean we'll cause him to exclaim, "See, I told you so."
turns out that atomic energy and weapons testing killed even more Americans than previously estimated. New research from the University of Arizona suggests that the hidden costs of developing nuclear weapons were far larger than previous estimates, with radioactive fallout responsible for between 340,000 and 690,000 American deaths from 1951 to 1973.
The US government admitted, admittedly well after the fact, that fallout from atomic weapons tests had caused cancer in nearby communities, despite previously hyping the safety of those tests. However, their estimates were conservative and only focused on the hardest hit communities. The new research tells a very different story, multiplying the death toll by at least 10. Given the reluctance of the US to admit to the original problems with atomic weapons testing, these new numbers are especially chilling.
And from bombs, we move to bombshells, a news which is sure to shock the entire political establishment. Trump has wound up his voter fraud commission, with the commission making a startling announcement.
The announcement being it found no evidence of fraud at all.
Now, this is startling for two reasons. The admission that the Commission found nothing out of the ordinary when it came to voter registration and voting in the 2016 election, as well as the fact that the admission contradicts early statements by the Vice Chair of the Commission, Chris Kobach.
Kobach had earlier claimed in an interview with Breitbart a week prior that the result of their investigation would be handed to the Department of Homeland Security and that the Democrats were becoming uncomfortable with what the committee had found.
Trump had also claimed in May of last year that there were substantial findings of fraud. Yet, according to the White House, no records or findings will be handed to the Department of Homeland Security.
Now, some have accused President Trump of using the Voter Fraud Commission as a smokescreen to distract from the allegations of Russia hacking the election, in essence creating the idea of a Democrat-led conspiracy to distract from the allegations of certain members of his campaign conspiring with Russia.
However, now the question is whether the results Kobach has been hyping up in the media for weeks are being covered up, or whether it was sound and fury signifying nothing.
Talking about sound and fury, what about that Michael Wolff book? We had thought about covering it, but as most of the really juicy stuff has been out in the media for weeks, it would have just been a 20-minute recounting material you've already heard.
Yeah, basically Trump probably didn't think he'd actually win, and Steve Bannon seems really put out by Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner meeting with the Russians.
More interesting is the fate of Steve Bannon, who so annoyed Trump with his comment on his son-in-law that Trump Stalined Bannon and effectively wrote him out of the presidential campaign history and transition team.
Then, after Bannon failed to placate Trump by effectively acting like a cuck,
something Bannon despises in others but couldn't help himself from doing given the situation,
Bannon ended up also losing his position at Breitbart, presumably because A, everything he's touched in recent months has been a stunning victory for the Democrats.
See, for example, his support for Roy Moore.
And the fact that once he stopped being useful for the president, the rich backers of Breitbart were finally happy to get rid of him.
As someone pointed out on Facebook, there's no winner here if you want change in the US. Bannon was, and probably still is, a terrible person, but he was also a terrible tactician. Another year of Bannon championing terrible alt-right candidates in the midterms might have been good for the Democrats. Then again, the harm of Bannon having any political sway was going to be hard for minorities, for women, and for anyone the alt-right disagrees with. So long, Steve, and no thanks for playing.
Finally, an interesting note on the Russia collusion investigation.
People have long suspected that the Russia collusion investigation started with the Christopher Steele dossier.
We should point out that Lindsey Graham is trying to subpoena Steele on election fraud charges, so that shows you how seriously certain Republicans are treating the matter. That matter being ignoring how potential state actors like Russia tried to influence the election.
However, it now turns out the event which started off the initial investigation wasn't the Steele dossier, but rather the Australians, which also suddenly makes sense of that angry phone call between Trump and Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull.
Yes, you see, George Papadopoulos, one of those many people involved in the Trump campaign who apparently weren't actually doing anything important, mouthed off about the campaign team's connection to Russia in the presence of the Australian ambassador to the United Kingdom, which eventually led the Australian intelligence services to contact their US counterparts. That in turn led to the start of the investigation before the Steele dossier was passed to them.
So the focus on the Steele dossier and the connection between Christopher Steele and the Democrats obfuscates the causal story of why the investigation was launched. It was basically Australia's fault.
Bloody Aussies. Which also makes me think this is far too much Trump-related news and we should declare another Trumpatorium until there's actual juicy conspiracy news to share.
It's true, these news segments would be much more varied if we had a bit less Trump to talk about. Let's just hope that nothing exciting happens between now and next week.
Which is unlikely, but that's just the way the news goes. Right, by my crude reckoning, we still have plenty of time to talk about this week's topic.
Indeed.
Which is, we finally, I'm surprised it's taken it this long, moved to the world of video games. I like a good video game.
And I do enjoy the good old pew-pews.
So the game we're talking about today
Is Space Invaders.
But that would be good. All I know, the only thing interesting I know about Space Invaders is that it caused a coin shortage in Japan when it first came out.
That is actually quite interesting.
It was either that, no, I'm sure it was Space Invaders. Either that or Pac-Man, I'm pretty sure it was Space Invaders. But yeah.
It's actually quite amazing how primitive and, in retrospect, boring those early arcade machines were, and yet, as children,
they were.
They were the greatest thing since sliced bread. And sliced bread has never been exciting, so why people compare stuff to sliced bread, I don't know.
No. It does actually, though, show you just how big arcade games used to be back in the 80s and 90s, I suppose, before they were outpaced by home consoles.
You used to be a big player of the arcade games.
I was a massive player of the arcade games, but now I have a PlayStation, so there you go. But there were rumours swirling around about this game. Now, some people call it Polybius, some people call it Polybius. Personally, I say Polybius.
Why would you say Polybius?
Why wouldn't I?
Because that's not even a plausible pronunciation of the name Polybius. It's the name of a Greek historian.
How dare you accent shame me, Matthew? Now, this game called Polybius or whatever.
Polybius.
I knew it as an urban legend. It's something that's been talked about for quite a while now, although perhaps not as long as it seems. We'll get to that.
Yeah, skipping to the end.
I am skipping. I'm just a little teaser, just a little something to keep them interested.
But see, if you're going to tease someone, you need to do more explication before you tease them with the conclusion. Otherwise, they're going, I have no idea. So tell me, Josh, what is Polybius?
Right, well, there are stories that there was this game, this mysterious arcade game, showed up in an arcade or possibly a few arcades in Portland for some reason in the early 1980s. 1981 is usually the date they give. And supposedly this very mysterious game, which nobody is entirely clear on exactly what it was like. There are just claims that it was
psychotropic,
psychedelic, psychotropic, very weird style of game with lots of flashing lights and bright colours and all sorts of stuff. Well,
the common denominator seems to be it was a quite Tempest-esque style game. So Tempest is, the best way to describe it is, it's like Space Invaders, except that rather than moving laterally across the screen, your spaceship is actually moving in a kind of circle and the enemies are coming towards you.
Sort of a 3D-ish thing where they're coming
Yeah.
up sort of a well and you're circling around the edge. But
Goes
there's
pew, pew, pew.
apparently like that, but very, very weird, trippy visuals, strange noises, possibly subliminal messages or something. Which then eventually caused the game to be highly addictive, with stories of people queuing up and fights starting for who gets to play, and also strange side effects of
headaches, nausea, and memory loss. So please see a doctor before playing Polybius.
Yes, night terrors, hallucinations, amnesia, all sorts of weird stuff. And then on top of that, there were reports, even stranger reports of sort of men in black, strange government agents coming in and examining the machine after hours, reading data off it, taking it away, and so on and so forth.
I think what you should point out is that it's not that the initial claim was there were government agents / the men in black. There were people in generic suits and overalls who were examining the machine between playtests. And given the rest of the story we're going to tell, people have imputed from that they probably were the eponymous Men in Black. Which, a side point here, if you've ever read Steele's The Mothman Prophecies, the Men in Black actually didn't start off as wearing black suits, just wearing plain grey suits.
And indeed, in the original versions of the Men in Black myths, weren't they meant to be like aliens?
Yeah,
they were sort of weird other.
They would come into your home and go, "What is this?" You say, "It is Jello," and they would go, "Hello, Jello," and they tried to communicate with it.
Yes,
so they weren't government agents. They were the type of things that government agents asked after.
But the myth evolved. But anyway, we're not exactly talking about that myth. We're talking about a different myth, which eventually, as you say, came to become a bit of a conspiracy theory as well. People started to suggest that this game was some sort of a weird...
Well, hold on. So the thing was the fact that the game then suddenly just...
Oh, yes, sorry. The game, it was only in arcades for like a month or something, and then just like Kevin Spacey at the end of the thing, or from that new movie about the Gettys, poof, disappeared. In a cloud of...
That actually would be great if in All the Money in the World you had a scene, Kevin Spacey walks on, and then Christopher Plummer clicks his fingers and Kevin Spacey just evaporates into a cloud of dust and he says, "Were you expecting someone else?"
But
that's a different film.
Yes, enough Usual Suspects / horrible sexual abuse allegation references.
Well, that just became awkward.
It did a little bit. No, so basically, adding to the mystery of the whole thing, supposedly this weird game with weird things happening around it then just disappeared and no one ever heard from it ever again. And this all led people to suggest it was possibly some sort of government experiment, maybe some sort of MK Ultra sort of thing where they were testing out some weird psychedelic subliminal technology
which is
to see what it had.
out of the question given the other experiments going on in the US at the time. The idea that America or the Russians, who were also engaged in kind of cold psychic mind warfare, would experiment on their own populations turned out to be something that those governments were actually willing to engage in. But why are we taking this story seriously? I mean, surely what we know about the arcade scene, particularly the arcade scene of the 80s, was that there were an awful lot of prototype games out there that were being trialled in small markets. Portland was probably a great place to do this. A lot of arcades, a lot of teenagers willing to play games. You would install a machine in an arcade, see whether it was popular, and from that you would then go, well, yep, that's a success, we'll roll out 20 of those across the country, or,
not really
no, that game's not really very good, so we'll just repurpose the boards and make a completely different game. So, why is this game so interesting?
Well, basically, I think mostly for the side effecty things about it, and the fact that, despite the fact that these rumours are around, kind of hard to find any actual hard proof or evidence.
Yeah, and therein
existed.
lies the issue. So, whilst we know there are a lot of prototype arcade games out in the wild, almost every single game that existed, at least in the West, there are examples of Eastern Bloc games where rumoured games have suddenly come into existence because people have found the boards after quite some time. But in most cases, we kind of know who made them, how long they existed for and what they were repurposed for. But Polybius appears in Portland in 1981. All we know it was made by a person or organization called Sinislotion, and then disappears. And completely disappears from history. No boards, no ROMs. The only thing we have is an alleged screenshot, which is probably actually a doctored image designed to look like the opening screen of Polybius. Otherwise, nothing apart from the stories of nausea, time loss, and other related activities.
So the question then, I suppose, is, well, if nothing, no actual artifacts of the game except for a suspect screenshot of the title screen exist, how do we know about Polybius in the first place?
Well,
Or at all?
on one level we know about Polybius because it's now become a standard part of urban legend and weird conspiracy theories about the computer game community. In that people go, well, there was this game in Portland in 1981 which we have no evidence for the existence of now. So what does that mean? Why have they covered this up?
And yes, it really is sort of in the realm of urban legend, I suppose. It's a story that gets passed around from person to person with usually vague details and very little in the way of corroboration. But the thing that I guess it can actually be traced to a single sort of source where it supposedly first was brought to the popular consciousness, which was on a website. Websites didn't exist in the 1980s, did they?
No, they did not.
So
In fact,
it's probably more recent.
yeah.
It was on a website.
So, tell me about this website. What is the website in question?
The website in question is coinop.org, which is an online site devoted to coin-op games, old arcade games.
It's basically a growing database of games, which has links to information about who produced those games, when the game was released, and information about the board setups and the like. So basically, it's an online encyclopedia like Wikipedia, but it's devoted to one particular topic, which is a complete archive of all the arcade coin-up games that existed.
So a page for Polybius appeared on this website sometime around 1999-2000. And here's where it gets a little bit interesting, because people have since, as the rumour has sort of grown and grown, and it's sort of been developed, people have popped out of the woodwork saying, I was a developer on this mysterious game, and things like that.
Well, I remember playing it back in the day.
Yes. And so as it's grown, people have eventually taken it seriously enough that they've actually gone and said, let's have a look. What else can we find out about this? Surely there must be something prior to the year 2000 that mentions this game at all, but there kind of isn't.
Well, I mean, the only other reference to it is a Usenet post about it, which slightly predates the CoinUp arcade page, but appears to also be written by the same person who authored that page in the first instance. And what's interesting about the Usenet post is that the person basically writes a post on Usenet going, for those of you who don't know what Usenet is, because some of you will be young enough to not remember the internet before we had the World Wide Web. Usenet were message boards back in the days where we didn't have web pages. Oh, those were the days.
Never went on Usenet.
Didn't you?
No,
I used it all the time.
No, my family was a bit slow getting on the net, and so by the time I lived in a house with an internet connection, it was World Wide Web all the way.
No. FTP and Usenet were my first experiences of the internet before the World Wide Web. Anyway. And so this person writes a post on Usenet and goes, have people heard of this game called Polybius? I believe it was released in Portland for a very short amount of time. And people experienced all sorts of weird occurrences, memory loss, sickness, headaches. Does anyone have any information about this game? Now, what's fascinating is that this was posted to a group which is devoted towards ferreting out old arcade games. And the immediate response was not, oh, that's interesting, we should check this out. The immediate response was, we've never heard of this game, it doesn't exist. Either you're hoaxing us or you've been told a lie.
Now, do we know who the author what that particular post was?
No.
No.
I don't know offhand.
No. We do know, or at least we do have fairly good reason to believe, that the entry on coinop.org was written by one Kurt Koller, who was the then owner of the coinop.org website. And there have since been it's popped up on, which was the magazine? Was it GameSpot or Games Radar?
Games Radar. Actually, so before we get onto that, the first plausible hypothesis I thought of when I was looking into this story is that the Polybius reference on the website might be what's called a false reference, which is a system you use when you want to detect plagiarism in other people's work. So, for example, if you're writing an encyclopedia, let's say an encyclopedia devoted to musicians of the Renaissance, and you're worried that someone is then going to take your work and copy it or modify it slightly to produce their own encyclopedia, what you do is you then create a false reference, so reference to a non-existent musician. You make sure this reference in no way links to any other part of the text. So you could only ever find out about this person by reading that reference and that reference alone. And then if that person ever turns up in another book claiming to be a history of Renaissance musicians or another encyclopedia, you can go, you haven't done any original research, you've just copied that from my work. It's a great way to detect plagiarism. And indeed, my book contains a false reference at the back. So if I then ever discovered this reference in another text, I'd be able to go, they've just cut and pasted a bibliography from one source and put it into this one, because that book does not exist.
Much like was it Ghost Towns, or whatever it is, the cartographers would put
fake
things on their maps.
Or ghost geographical entities, so small mountains or lakes, which if they appeared in another map, you'd go, no, but that doesn't exist.
It's only there because I put it there. So there was possibly, could that have been the case? This guy had just put this thing in his website so that he knew that if he saw Polybius show up anywhere else, then that person had been ripping off his content.
But the answer is no.
No.
Because a few years later, the gaming magazine Games Radar, I'm talking about a gaming magazine that is a physical thing.
Actual printed magazine.
Pages had a special devoted to a number of urban legends and unverified stories in the gaming community, which then the writers would say is true, is false, or we don't know. And they were shocked the Polybius story by the author of the Polybius page in such a way that they were then going, well, we don't know whether it's true or not, but it seems likely it could be. And that doesn't seem like someone creating a false reference.
No.
That seems like someone trying to create a false story.
So in the intervening period, people with more time on their hands than us have gone and had a jolly good look into the idea. In particular,
A rummage.
There's a very good documentary on YouTube called Polybius, the Video Game That Doesn't Exist, by a man called Stuart Brown. And he does quite a deep dive. He goes through the Wayback Machine archive.org or wherever it is, and has a really good hunt for any mention of this game on old Usenet boards on the internet anywhere before it showed up
in gaming magazines.
And really just does not manage to find anything.
No, it does seem as if the story is invented in whole cloth in 2001. And so what makes this fascinating from our perspective was that Stuart Brown's investigation is someone taking a conspiracy theory seriously. So they've gone, look, there's a conspiracy theory here about a game in the gaming community. In this particular story, there are claims about it being linked to mind control experiments in the 80s. There's talk here about Men in Black and government complicity. And yet there's no reason to believe the game ever existed. The story appears in whole cloth in 2001 or thereabouts, with a Usenet post and then a page on the internet authored by the same person, or at least people associated with the same person. And it seems that this person has created a story presumably designed to draw traffic to their website.
Yeah.
So they found a really interesting, oh, that's fascinating, which once you're on the website reading about it, you're like, oh, I should read up about some other of the video games. I mean, I do this all the time on Wikipedia. What's that game on the Atari 400 I played back in the day? Oh, that's right, it was Caverns of Kafka. I wonder what the author of that game also produced. Oh, they did this thing and this thing. Oh, look, what are they doing now? 3 hours later, you're reading about Lara Croft in the original Tomb Raider games.
Yep.
True story.
I believe it entirely. Stuart Brown and also a fellow called Brian Dunning, who had an article on the Skeptoid website, both pointed to real-life events that we do know about, which could have sort of maybe formed a bit of a basis for this. There were incidences of people suffering from weird effects after playing video games, but that was usually because they'd been playing video games non-stop for a ridiculous amount of time and had sort of got overtired and dehydrated and collapsed. There were 1 or 2 cases of that happening. It was the case that the government looked into arcade machines from time to time. Apparently there were concerns about gambling, and the FBI did investigate some machines to see if they'd been tampered with to cheat and alter the odds or something if gambling was involved in the playing of video games. And of course, let's not forget the number of video games. If you played video games in the 80s and 90s, you would have seen a big warning from the FBI saying winners don't do drugs on the title screens of a great many video games. So there you had the FBI themselves actually on video games as far as the eye could see. So there were elements out there which a person could very easily sort of look at and go, if I combined these things, and of course, people hearing the fabricated urban legend could maybe remember these real-life events and maybe get them a little bit mixed up and start to think to themselves, did I hear something about that way back then? Maybe I did.
I'm also thinking about the fact that for a long period of time, people weren't aware that the kind of strobing or flashing light you could get off CRT monitors from either playing video games in arcades or playing games at home, in some cases could trigger epileptic strokes, which was another health issue that people only became aware of as gaming became more common, and people went, oh, that's triggering things in the sensory system. We should probably do something about that. So some of the talk of illness also fits into things that were happening in the 80s.
Yes, and it wasn't... when the infamous Pokemon episode that supposedly caused a bunch of seizures in Japan, that was mid-90s.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a while before certainly the fact that flashy, stroby effects on TV screens could trigger epileptic seizures became actual, something in the public consciousness. So yeah, all of these things, they're conceivable, the individual elements, all definitely have some basis in reality.
And the genius of this particular story is that this one person took all of these elements and spun a quite interesting story with an associated conspiracy theory behind it. And it actually took quite a bit of effort. So Stuart Brown points out in his documentary that using things like the Wayback Machine and Google Scholar and the like is something we can only do now to be able to track all of those magazine about computer gaming that existed in the 80s to see if you can find any reference to the game. And only now can we go, look, there's no archival evidence of anyone talking about a game of this particular type until 2001.
Slightly unrelated topic. Did you see, I only just saw this morning, a whole bunch of occult texts are being scanned and put on the internet.
I did not see this
by an organisation, thanks to a large donation from Dan Brown.
I'm very conflicted by this news. I am very, very... Although I think we now know what the plot of the next Dan Brown novel is going to be.
Yeah. So now we'll be able to, or it won't be long before we'll be able to internet search something along the lines of 1,000 mystic texts. So maybe one of them will have reference to Polybius. Who knows?
Well, the thing is, so there is a thing called the Polybius cipher.
Oh, yes.
So there probably will be a lot of
yeah.
references to Polybius in those, because it was a very quick and easy way to encode messages. And in fact, that's the only thing Stuart Brown could ever find in computer gaming magazines, was people referencing the cipher and writing programs to allow you to encrypt information using the Polybius cipher.
So, it sounds like there's a moral here. Along the lines of
Tragedy tomorrow, comedy tonight. That's the moral from If Anything Happened on the Way to the Forum.
Oh.
There must be a moral, always a moral.
This isn't a funny thing that happened on the way to the forum, though. This is the podcaster's guide to the conspiracy.
Oh. Never let me do my musical numbers anymore.
No, I shan't. But no, just in terms of it being good to investigate conspiracy theories, even though they sound a bit weird and wacky.
Yeah, basically. But also the fact that it actually takes some effort to investigate these things. It's not a trivial case of, oh, this is a ridiculous story. Showing that the Polybius conspiracy theory isn't actually much of an actual conspiracy at all requires quite a bit of work, and the people who do it should be applauded for actually putting the time into going, look, I treated this conspiracy theory seriously, sufficient to investigate it, so you now have good reason to go, look, when people talk about, I remember that Polybius game, you can go, no. Actually you don't. Probably.
Yes. And I suppose it's worth mentioning that this is a point you mentioned in your recent presentations in both Boise, Idaho, and New York, wasn't it?
California,
Yes.
And not. I actually didn't mention the Polybius conspiracy at all in Boise.
Oh, okay.
Only in Claremont. I discovered doing the Claremont talk, I had too much material, so I had to cut stuff out for Boise. They didn't get computer games.
Yes. And indeed, footage of this is available online.
Indeed, and you won't even have to pay a single cent. Amalgamated Conspiracy will take those cents from you.
So, I'd say if you want to hear Matthew saying more about this, but it's probably actually less than we've said now.
Yes, although there are images.
Yes. Pretty moving, no, not moving images, PowerPoint presentation images, but pretty images.
Yes, pretty images. Pretty images.
So go hunt it down anyway. I know, I mean, I saw about it because you linked to it on your Twitter. Which you're all following, aren't you?
That sounded very condemning. You could find it on my YouTube channel, which is at YouTube/HO Ransom, I think.
Oh, did you put it up? I thought it was the organisation.
Well, no, so the Claremont one... Oh, yes, the Claremont one was put up by the organisation. The Boise one is on my YouTube channel.
Right, well, there you go. Have a good look.
Anyway, if you just look up indent of conspiracy theories, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff online, none of which actually conspiracy theory... Actually, no, that's not true. There's at least one conspiracy theory about me out there written by what we would now call a member of the alt-right, talking about how I'm part of the problem in the academy in New Zealand. And the comments thread on that is hilarious, I say with quote marks, people listening to the podcast, because in the comments section, people are claiming that someone should put a tyre around my body, douse me in petrol, and set me alight. And they're not joking, they're being serious.
Hilarious.
Death threats on the internet. Yay!
So...
In other sad news, and because I'm thinking about music, the creator of WKRP in Cincinnati is dead.
Is he?
Yeah. So baby, if you've ever wondered whatever became of me, he's dead.
Oh, that's a shame. And so is the woman from the Cranberries.
Yes, but they're not the same person.
No.
At least not that I've heard yet.
No.
It's possible they are.
Yes, 2018, I suppose, I don't know, who was there on the stature of Bowie and Prince to get knocked off early in the year? We did say a little while ago, with the rash of celebrity deaths and conspiracy theories popping up around them, that just due to the expanding definition of what constitutes a celebrity and the age demographics of people, we're going to be seeing a lot more celebrity deaths, and it's not sinister, it's just human mortality and human demographics, but it hasn't been that much this year, although I suppose we're not even a month into it.
No, and also, suddenly I just can't think of anyone famous, apart from, apparently, Ben Affleck.
It's
the
not dead.
Well, at least, not by the time of recording.
No. So anyway, enough death and gloom and doom.
And references to WKRP in Cincinnati.
Great show.
It was.
I think
That is the end.
That
The
is
end
the
has
end.
been prepared for.
I suppose, has it? If it had been prepared for, I surely would have a polished routine to rattle off right now.
Well,
Instead, it is
all I'm going to
unstalling
say is
what I think what
that
it is I say at the end.
there probably won't be an episode next week because I will be in Australia
Yes.
applying for a visa at the Romanian consulate in Sydney.
For your next crazy jaunt off to Bucharest.
And then the week after that, I'm going to be in Wellington for my next crazy jaunt to see Welcome to Night Vale, a podcast I would recommend you listen to after, of course, listening to more episodes of this podcast. And because of the threat of amalgamated conspiracy, then putting money into our coffers so that we're not reliant on a conspiracy that's going to take money from you. Give to us so that they don't take from you. They may be entirely fictitious, but are they?
Yes.
Good.
Anyway, speaking of listening to this podcast, you are doing that right now. The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. I'm Josh Addison. He's M. Dentith. You probably already knew that. What you may not know is that this podcast is available on iTunes, unless you're listening to it on iTunes, in which case you do know that, but what you might still not know is that it's also available on places like Stitcher and a few other ones like that, and it's hosted for really real reals at podbean.com. So if you want to go right to the source, you can go to conspiracism.podbean.com, where you'll see the podcast and a few links to things, and you can even leave comments there. And there'll also be a link to our patronage campaign, both Podbean's native patronage system and a link to our Patreon campaign, where you can give us monies and things like that.
Indeed.
If you wish to contact us personally, in a perhaps more intimate setting, I don't know, than simply the dry comments wall of a hosted podcast. You can go on Twitter, where I am Monkey Fluids, and you, sir?
Conspiracism.
We're also on Facebook. Just search Facebook for Podcaster's Guide to Conspiracy. We're also on YouTube, which again you'll know if you're watching this on YouTube, but you're not. In both cases, Facebook and YouTube, just search for Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy is probably the easiest way to find us. And that, I think, is that.
That is the end, and the end has not just been prepared for, it has ended, and now we are in the epilogue.
We are the epilogue portion of the episode, where we basically put off saying goodbye, because that just seems a little bit too prosaic and weird, and we try to figure out some sort of more involved way of capping things off, and you realise we can't and just end up saying goodbye.
Yeah, which is what we're going to say now, which is goodbye.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, hosted by Josh Addison and M. Dentith. If you'd like to help support us, please find details of our pledge drive at either Patreon or Podbean. If you'd like to get in contact with us, email us at podcastconspiracy@gmail.com.